What do you call a guy with a huge rack who plays the bass? Seriously, though, welcome to the Authentic Action Podcast, Angel's Authentic Action Podcast. I'm Angel, and today I want to talk to you about human sexuality, really, but also uh, what's going on with the guys. I was listening to podcast with Professor Galloway, Scott Galloway, one of the internet's favorite men to love and hate. And it was recorded not too long ago, I think, and I was just listening to it a day or two ago. And he was talking about overarchingly this problem of what's going on with the guys and how that trickles through our whole society. So, um, just to sort of summarize and get us all on the same page, I think we mostly, if not all, agree that women doing better, having more equality, all of that is great, and nobody is trying to take away the empowerment that the feminine, that females in general in the legal system and in our society have expanded into in recent human history. And at the same time, one of the consequences or backlashes, or I don't know that it's so much of a backlash, probably a little of all, a little from column A, little from column B. Um, but one of the things that's happening now is that in contrast to women getting more education, making more money, there seems to be a real drastic decline in men feeling worthy, feeling like they're enough. If uh, if you look at suicide rates, they're alarming across the board. But if you start to really look at the specifics, I forget exactly what the statistic is, but I want to say it's 6 to 1, maybe even higher, men to women that are committing suicide. And that's in pretty much every subsection, and there are many. Um, and that's not to try to downplay the traumas and strifes and struggles that women still that women are still dealing with. But broadly, it is to say that as a society, we need each other. Men need women, women need men. Again, I'm speaking broadly, maybe not every man and every woman, but I think it's a it's arguable that pretty much all of us do better with some sort of I'm pausing because maybe it doesn't have to be a sexual relationship. I think at certain points of our life, for most of us, a sexual relationship and exploring our own sexuality is one of the most powerful and fulfilling and amazing parts of being a human. But I do acknowledge that maybe that's not quite for everyone. And so I want to be careful with my phrasing. Um, that said, I could rephrase and say that human sexuality is one of the most powerful creative energies there is in human society. And recently, we seem to be dampening that in both men and in women by way of dampening, lessening our attraction to each other and our attractability. And there's a whole lot of nuances to this, and I'm not at all trying to pretend like I have it all sorted out or worked out or that anyone does, because again, I think it's relatively complex. There's a lot of ins and outs to it, Maud. Let me know if you get to that reference. But again, overarchingly, As Scott Galloway, Professor G, was pointing out in this recent podcast I was listening to, much of human civilization, much of what is good, much of what we call evolution and progress is driven by men being sexually attracted to women and wanting to get laid, basically. So, um, recent changes in pornography and overconsumption of just all sorts of overstimulation. I like that Professor Galloway makes the point that it's not necessarily any one thing that's bad or inherently wrong in and of itself in the right amounts at the right time. It's the overabundance of things in the wrong amounts at the wrong time. Pornography being a great example, which can really destroy our attraction and attractability towards one another. So, um, I think that's true of most substances and things that we can eat and consume and forms of entertainment. None of it is inherently bad in that we should ban it across the board. It is much of it is worthy of a pause of contemplating how much and at what times and how do we put boundaries in place for ourselves so that we keep ourselves healthy and so that we keep our relationships healthy and moving forward. And a little pinky finger asterisk tangent, as I like to call it, in order to keep our relationships moving forward in a healthy way, it should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, that we need to have relationships with ourselves and ourselves in total being healthy. Not, 100% healthy all the time. That's not what I'm getting at. It's not like we can't have love when we're sick and dying, even. It's that overarchingly, most of the time, most of us need to be healthy and happy in order to overarchingly build a mostly healthy and happy society. That's what I'm trying to say. Feel what I'm putting down? I don't know if that's coming out quite clearly, but it's pretty clear in my head, so I'm hoping that it is. Um, yeah, attraction, that magnetic attraction that is sexual energy is the stuff that actually creates civilization. It creates actual new human beings. And recently, my son, in fact, just last night, my son told me that he is moving in with his girlfriend, and it's the first serious girlfriend that he's told me about. He's 29. He's what they might call a textbook late bloomer, and I'm so proud of him. He's just got a much calmer, clear way of doing things than I have, and so in that regard, he's waited. He's found a partner that he really thinks is of the caliber that he could create a family with, and now he's moving forward with those next steps to see how that unfolds. And that's certainly not how I did it. I was more of the trauma-inducing, flying by the seat of your pants, inebriated much of the time, making bad choices kind of camp. And that leads me to something, one of my favorite things that Scott Galloway talks about is that he encourages young people to make more bad decisions, to go out and engage in risky behavior. And I have to say I agree with that, like even though what I was just saying about being proud of my son for taking more of his time, I was starting to worry, and this is the point I'm getting at. I was starting to worry because he hadn't had a girlfriend that he told me about. Now he's told me that he had at least one other girlfriend before this one, which I'm grateful for. But honestly, I am frequently grateful for the many, many, many bad decisions that I made when I was younger. And heck, I'm still grateful for the times when I've have the energy to make an occasional bad decision still. I'll say it. I'm looking over here at something. Um, I think that Professor G has a really great point, which is that the majority of human progress kind of happens by, I'm hesitant because that's not, he didn't say this. I'm saying this. And maybe it's not the majority, so let me rephrase. A lot of human progress, including probably a majority of us human individuals, actual individual humans, like our physical bodies, have come about due to combinations of risky behavior and bad decisions, largely driven by sexual attraction. And again, I feel like I'm not really giving this topic, doing it justice. So probably it's a topic that we should discuss more often and more in depth and with more of us. And I have heard other people having this conversation, and I'm grateful for it. And part of why I wanted to talk about it on the Authentic Action podcast is because it is an important topic. I feel like our sexual energy is largely being squandered and dampened down, and my son telling me that he's moving in with his girlfriend has created such a sense of relief about something that I didn't even know I was so worried about, and such a profound reminder of how that's really the most important stuff that we learn how to have relationships with each other. Those dynamic, messy, beautiful, wonderful, usually sexually driven. Not, again, not all of them, not all the time, but at least at the beginning, and at least the majority of them are often sparked by that sexual attraction. And I think it's important to acknowledge and important to think about not letting it slip away so easily, and certainly not just repressing it and suppressing it and dampening it down. Um, so much in so many ways. I do trust that nature will prevail, and that sexual reproduction has itself figured out pretty well. So I think I probably am worried for nothing. And just as my son helped me remember when he told me this great news that he's moving in with his girlfriend, um, yeah, nature has a way of figuring that out. And sexual attraction with its pheromones and its hormones and its biological clock tickings, um, does have its wonderful way. But the thing is, you gotta get outside. You gotta get somewhere where you can be in physical proximity together. And I'm so grateful that my son met his girlfriend at a game. He's a gamer, but he goes to physical tournaments, and they met at a tournament, and they go to tournaments now, and that's a beautiful, wonderful thing. And they can sit and play together and go travel together, and then meanwhile discover things like yoga and raising chickens, and with a little luck, perhaps raising baby humans pretty soon. It's so exciting. Yeah, I think love is a beautiful thing. Human sexuality is a beautiful thing, and a very, very, very powerful thing. And so, yeah, I want us to remember that. And another thing I want to talk about related to that is our human imperfection in all of this. But before I get into that, I want to pause and remind you to check out our sponsors, the Authentic Action Academy, with some courses that combine old school and new school way of thinking, hands-on way of doing, uh, real human interactions, critiques, feedback into coursework that is multi-sensory, multi-level oriented. And we are looking forward to building a broader and broader course offering menu for you. So keep your eyes out for that and check out the description, and sign up for our newsletter so you can be kept informed about all of that coming up. And our other sponsor, the Sleeping Dragons Company, which you can find on Etsy these days. Website may be back up soon, but it is also direct linked to www.sleepingdragons.co. That's dragons with an S, .co. And that should take you to the Etsy store where you can find an eclectic selection of hard to find essential oils, fragrances, aromatherapy perfumes, hard to find herbs, heart shaped healing stones, and much, much more to spark your natural creative spirit. Awaken your creative spirit with Sleeping Dragons today. Thanks for checking out our sponsors. And now back to our regular program. Back to the show, as Gary Vee would like to say. I want to talk about something that Esther Perel talks about often. She's my favorite. Is she a marriage counselor? I think she is. Psychotherapist. Anyhow, she talks about relationships a lot, and she has a bestseller you may have heard of called Mating in Captivity. And she talks a lot about infidelity and the struggles of monogamous partnership and polyamorous partnership, just those struggles of intimate partnerships and marriages, and how natural it is to struggle, how natural it is for us to run up into trouble, into problems when we're dealing with our sexuality, when we're dealing with our partners, when we're dealing with our partner's sexuality. And I wanted to bring this up as I'm bringing up the idea of male suicide and male sexuality being dampened and female sexuality being dampened and sort of left out in the cold due to this whole equation and the way it all fits together or doesn't fit together, as the case may be. And I think it's important to keep in mind that it takes some work to have relationships, that anyone who's ever had a really admirable relationship that you might look at and go like, oh, I wish I had that. If you ask them, they will tell you it's taken some work. There's been some ups and downs. There's things to figure out. There's things to work out. It takes communication. It takes being willing to get things wrong and then apologize and try again and get things better the next time, just like with any worthy endeavor. And I think human intimate relationships have the capacity to be perhaps the most worthy endeavor that any of us could ever hope to have. And that being the case, they might just be the most challenging, most, the most fraught with the potential for suffering and strife and all the things that we often would really rather avoid. And which is why loneliness is such a prevalent problem and loops back around to why suicide is such a prevalent problem. So many of us are feeling so disconnected and so lonely, and that has so much to do with our misinterpretation, I think, of what it takes to have a healthy relationship. We have these high expectations of ourselves and each other, and then somehow that translates to us settling for much, much less than we probably could or would want to. And I think we can do better on both of those fronts. I think we can raise the bar when it comes to how we treat ourselves and each other. And I think we can lower the bar when it comes to the level of perfection that we're expecting from ourselves and each other. And a lot of that means that we're going to have to get better at apologizing, I think, and get better at self reflecting and looking at where we where we owe each other an apology or ourselves an apology sometimes. I've had to do some of that myself recently. Um, yeah, a big clue that you're starting to work through some of your own BS is, I think, when you start to see the obvious irony in those internal accusations. If you're anything like me, maybe you have an internal narrator that tells what I like to call shit stories sometimes, mine pretty regularly. And and left unguarded, left undisciplined, that shit storyteller will tell shitty stories about how me and everyone else around me is a shitty person and we don't deserve better, or we deserve all the bad that we're getting, and we bring the bad things on ourselves, and it's just been getting, there's a myriad of shitty stories. I'm sure you've heard them all. I'm willing to bet that you've probably told yourself at least most of the same ones I've told myself, if not all of them, because I've talked to enough people in this life so far to know that that's sort of a default situation in the human mind, especially given our current state of programming. But perhaps even without that programming, you can look back at old documents and see that the human mind has been struggling with similar tensions between our our egoic desires, our brain chatter, our logical side, and our broader scope, like what you might call your higher self, that self which is part of life on a grander scale and cares more about legacy and the future that we're leaving our children and the systems that we're building for our children's children's children and all those beautiful things. I'm looking at the time over there again. Um, yeah, I guess I should start wrapping this up, and not that there's any hurry. And I think that's an important little pinky finger asterisk to throw in while I'm thinking of it, is that there isn't any hurry, that it's important to take your time. And at the same time, it's important to get started. Don't just wait. Don't just stall. Don't just be stagnant. Start. Ask somebody out. Start working out and improving yourself. If you're lonely, join a group, find an interest. If you don't have an interest, just try something and then decide if you hate it or you like it and move on from there. It's really about just taking action, which is what the Authentic Action podcast and the Authentic Action Academy is really here to promote and hopefully instill more of in you, is this idea that the master fails more times than the beginner or the novice has even tried. So you need to not be afraid of failure. And in fact, I would do you one better and say you need to embrace failure. You need to look for failure, not for failure's sake necessarily, although sometimes that might be a good way. It's been a great many people who've developed confidence in sales and in dating by just looking for the no, they call it. And that can be a great strategy because every no you learn something with every no, especially if you're not emotionally attached to it. You're not attaching your self-worth to it. You're just going out there and trying it out. And you're going to learn something. You're either going to have a success, triple ding, 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 ding of success, or you're going to have a failure. Ding, 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 you failed and you learned something. And either way, that's success in the long run. Because even if you just ding, ding, ding of success, in the long run, if that's all you do, it really doesn't help us progress. You don't learn anything. You don't evolve. You don't get to anything new. You don't get to the good stuff. And I think that is really what Scott Galloway was talking about or is talking about. I've heard him talk about it more than once when he's talking about getting out there and taking some risks and engaging in, potentially regrettable behavior, especially when you're young and you have a better chance of surviving it. I often have said that I am so grateful that I did so many risky things when I was younger because there are so many of them that I wouldn't survive at this stage of the game. And that's just a fact because I did a pretty good job. I'll pat myself on the back of engaging in risky behavior, potentially catastrophic behavior, even, which I don't necessarily recommend, but I do attest that those are the experiences that I got the most out of. It's like the level of potential catastrophe does seem to correlate sometimes with the level of potential, just potential, full stop, I suppose, the potential for growth, the potential for learning, the potential for epiphany. And, that said, I think many of us have had some sexual relationships that we might look back on as not wise or not necessarily healthy, and at the same time, part of our unfolding, part of our evolutionary process, hopefully that brings us closer to being healthy and happy and sane enough to have those healthy, happy partnerships where we can raise a family together. I did want to mention in this ramble that I really think that while a single parent can raise a child, I was a single mother. I'm a second generation single parent. My mother had me out of wedlock, and I had my son out of wedlock. And I really think people should partner up and get married if possible before they have kids. And that's a strange thing to hear myself saying. I'm not that big on the religious aspects of marriage, but I think that I'm hesitant, but I actually think that the legalities, the formal ritualized aspects where you promise to stay together and stick it out in front of your friends and family, and you maybe even legally obligate yourselves to each other and entangle yourselves up in a way where it is difficult to get out of it when you would really rather walk away. I think there's actually value in that because it forces you to grow through those times where you might be failing and where it might be hard and where you might otherwise walk away. And I think that children, and again, I'm speaking broadly speaking, there are always exceptions to every rule or every generality. And so I want to stress that I am not trying to put any single parents down. I did the best I could as a single parent, and many of my friends did and are doing that as well. And I give you all kudos if you're out there as a single parent. I know your struggle. I'm sending you love. You're doing a good job. And it's not impossible by any means to raise a healthy, happy human being. And part of the relief that I felt recently when my son told me he's moving in with his girlfriend, and I reflect on how he's bloomed so slowly, is that I think, generationally speaking, we do make changes. Each generation, each time, each of us has choices, and we can choose to do better or we can choose to do worse. Sometimes our choices don't quite work out the way, we think they're going to, or there are many, many factors in play that we don't know about, we don't see. And so things don't always work out the way that we think they're going to based on our choices. Um, Still, and also, I think it's very important to do our best to make the best choices that we can and to keep both of those constructs in mind, the individual, your own life, your own health and happiness, your own story, your own unique attractions and desires, and also the broader big story of life itself, of humanity at large, and how we keep this infinite game going, how we keep propagating healthier and healthier systems of helping, how we promote healthier relationships with ourselves, with each other, with our children, in our children's lives, in our grandchildren's lives, so that so that this whole thing can keep going. And even if as it does, as it will surely change and evolve and probably look very, very different as AI is coming into the picture, as robots are coming into the picture, as human sexuality continues to evolve, as we are developing different ways of playing with our own genetics and um, developing different goals that like space travel and different kinds of longevity. It's all fascinating. It's all exciting. And I trust that as we go through it, if we continue to just keep giving ourselves room to pause, reflect, pay attention to our desires, pay attention to our calm, coherent knowings, pay attention to each other as men and women, as fathers and mothers, as sons and daughters. I trust that we can continue to move forward and enjoy each other, enjoy those sparks that happen so delightfully, so naturally. I think that we're better off as individuals and as society with partnerships, with healthy relationships. And again, not always, not all the time, not without like I also think it's important to have time apart. I think it's important to know the pains and struggles of failure in order to really appreciate the deliciousness of successes, as I was saying at the beginning. So I'm not trying to say you should never fail. I am saying get out there and get some on ya. Make some bad choices, but then think about the choices that you've made. Apologize where it's necessary and take that chance when it comes down to it and tell her that you love her. Tell him that you love him. Do the best you can to take the leap when it presents itself. Ride it out when you need to. Don't forget that life is much too important to take it too seriously, so lighten up whenever you can. And on that note, I will remind you one more time to check out our sponsors. Check out the description if you would like to get on my mailing list. And um, there should be a link somewhere, depending on where you are listening or watching. I encourage you to subscribe, give us a 5-star rating if you're in that sort of place. Share with your friends and family. Leave a comment. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know what you think I could do better, what I'm doing well, all those things I really, really appreciate. I also really appreciate you for being yourself and for letting me be me. I'm Angel, the artist, aka ZGALA, the art angel, aka Auntie Angel. This has been the Authentic Action Podcast. And What do you call a guy who has a huge rack and plays the bass? A musician. But you're welcome. Ciao for now. Good to you.